Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 5th of March and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 11, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
So before we get into some of the stories, we've got a few little shout-outs this week, haven't we? Because we had the pleasure of having Darren Martin on, who's the Director of Valuations at CAP HPI there, and he shared with us on last week's episode the view on what happened in February and some thoughts on the what to expect over the coming weeks, which was very insightful and really has been, you know, the message for the last few months, hasn't it, Curtis, that the devil is in the detail now more than ever.
Yeah, very much so. So if you didn't catch last week's episode, that will be on your podcast feed. So do check it out, because Darren, as ever, had plenty of insight, plenty of views on, as you say, what happened over the course of February. But also, I think, probably more importantly, what his take is on March and the coming months.
Yeah, definitely. And we're joined this week again by Stephen Whitton for a Men Able moment. And this one's themed, interestingly, around the International Women's Day, which is due.
Yes, so that's due next week, and Steve gives some insight into his thoughts around that. And again, it's very topical. He touches on some subjects that he feels very passionate about. So that will be coming up in the second half. And also, if you'd like to get in touch with us or send us a press release or come on the show, just email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com, or join our LinkedIn group, or follow us on Twitter, message us on Twitter. Someone who did get in touch during the week was a friend of the podcast, Julian Stockton, from Angus McKinnon up in Uttoxeter, and interesting press release he's put out about they've donated a car to the local community ambulance as a responder unit. So good luck with the project there, Julian. I mean, it sounds fascinating what you're doing.
No, great work, and Julian, thanks again for getting in touch and getting us a shout out on that one. So if anybody else, as Curtis has said there, if you do want to get in touch, then do drop us, say, Curtis, an email to us, or get in touch via LinkedIn, Twitter, or even Facebook if you want to. Then we'll try and cover your story or any updates you've got.
So headlines this week, we've actually got an exclusive from eBay Motors Group looking at February used car trends, their market view, which is just being published. We've got the new car and van registrations also for February. Car dealers are positive despite loss of traditional March plate change mayhem. I haven't seen a new car yet. Have you, Phil?
Nope, not. But then again, I've not been out. So
Still time. Apart from walking the dog, haven't been anywhere. Europe's auto production crashes as flow of wire harnesses dries up. Motors.co.uk launches video series highlighting women in automotive, and we'll finish this week's show with an acquisition. And as you also mentioned, we'll have Steve Whitton as well.
Yeah. So as you say there, the exclusive to the podcast is a quick look at the market view from eBay Motors Group, who power the podcast, and some great insight again from eBay on this, and looking at obviously the dealer's average advertised price has taken a slight dip, hasn't it, by 0.3% down to 17,876 this time.
Yeah, so this story, as you say, it's an exclusive, so it should hit the media on Monday, and it's worth pointing out that the eBay Motors Group market view is actually available now on their website, so you can head over to their website and have a look and download the report. But we'll give you some of the sort of top line figures from it. So what they're saying in the release is the used car market showed further signs of stability in February, with only marginal fluctuations in both pricing and stock levels, while days to sell actually quickened. And as you pointed out, so with regards to prices, they dipped just 0.3% to £17,924. Sorry, down to £17,876. And that was after a marginal rise in January of 0.8%. So we are seeing that stability now. And that really does follow on from what Darren was talking about last week, which is obviously what he's seeing in the trade side of prices as well.
Yeah, and as you say there, that sort of the stock volume per dealership is now at 45.6, and that's down from February of last year that it was 51.9, and marginally down from January that was at 46.2. So again, some interesting shifts there. And then when you start to look at volume levels by car supermarket, franchise and independent, and we need to make sure I get this the right way around, Curtis, but for car supermarkets back in February of 2021, they were running at 341 on average, and this year down to 308. For franchise dealers have dropped from 64 in February of 2021 down to 58 on average in February of this year. And for independents, a slight drop from 38 units on average in February of 2021 down to 34 units on average in February of this year. So again, a drop and a similar drop from what they were seeing in January of this year as well, didn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting you point to the different sectors, because if we just go back to pricing for a moment, because there's some interesting fluctuations in some of the pricing trends. So the only retail sector to see prices actually drop was car supermarkets, where they were down 1.7% to £18,546. Franchise dealers remained on a par with January at £21,387, whilst independents actually saw an increase of 1.4% to 14,881. So some interesting dynamics going on there around pricing from the different sectors. And if we carry on, look at average days to sell, because car supermarkets, they led the way, averaging 28.4 days to sell, so that's over a week faster than they were averaging back in January. Franchise dealers saw days to sell reduce from 45.1 to 42.5 days, while independents were virtually unchanged at around 50.6 days.
Yeah, and I think we could spend all day talking through some of this stuff on the market view, couldn't we, Curtis? I mean, there's a lot of detail on the market view, and as Curtis said there, it is available now. So if you've got time this weekend, do head over to eBay Motors Group and check that out. Again, giving you a little bit of detail of in terms of price points, but by model. Even by fuel type as well, some fascinating insight in there around the type of fuel type that's selling and the time in which it's selling and prices and things like that. So, as always, a great little deep dive into a lot of the data that eBay Motors are seeing on their system. So, we would urge you to take a look at that. And like I say, the press release should be out on Monday morning in the media, and there'll probably be a link back to the PDF version of the report as well.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on with the headlines, car dealer, new car registrations in February rose 15% versus 2021, but was still down on pre-pandemic levels. So quite a long, detailed headline there, but it sort of captures the gist of the story. So new car regs in February down 15%, with 58,994 new cars registered, and it's worth pointing out that February is traditionally a low volume month because it precedes the plate change. But I guess what we're seeing here is, it's as we head into March. I mean, we still don't know what supplies will be like in showrooms, and this is possibly setting the scenes. But what really interested me here was that the rise was just 7,682 units. So it's not much of a sort of year on year increase, but it's actually 26% down on the pre-pandemic levels of February 2020, which is pretty much the last month of normality, and it's actually on a par with the 2009 financial crash figures for February. So it kind of puts February in a bit of context there.
Yeah, and you're right, as you say, it's very difficult with some of these when you start getting caught up in the percentages in such a low volume month. When we're looking at the seasonality of the figures coming out of the new vehicle registrations, I think you're right there. I think, we're looking at this data now, and predominantly now this is probably our last opportunity to look at a credible year-on-year pre-pandemic performance figure in February of 2020, because we know that we started to see signs across not just the UK but the European international markets of the pandemic starting to hit, and we know that in the UK it hit on the 23rd of March. So this is kind of the last full month of a pre-pandemic that we can compare. But I think moving forward, there is signs of recovery. There is green shoots of supply starting to come through, and I think Devon Martin mentioned it on the interview with him last week. Was that you may see it by specific manufacturers or even specific models that you're getting some supply through. And one of the stories that we're going to talk about this morning as well, we sort of allude to that, but because it is now down to that supply chain and availability of product. So you may see the March figures and start to see where supply now is relevant to specific manufacturers, and as I said, specific models starting to appear. As you know, I like to look at some of the European markets as well. So just to give you a little bit of context of where the UK is against some of our European competitors, that Germany performed very well, again seeing an increase in year on year, just over 200,000 units, showing a 3.2% increase, albeit again that was a 16.4% decline on pre-pandemic figures of February 2020. France unfortunately saw a year-on-year decline, down 13%, down to 115,000, and 31% down to pre-pandemic levels. Italy was down 22% compared to February of last year, and down 32% compared to February of 2020. And Spain actually saw an increase up to 62,100, up 6.6%, but still down significantly compared to a pre-pandemic of 34.4%. Now, I think, again, back to your point there, Curtis, these heavy double-digit declines are in main, very low volumes when you start to look at Spain and the UK. Both performed generally in February of low sub 100,000 units, don't they? So, again, to put that in context. But again, starting to see some recovery, but it is slow recovery that we're starting to see.
Yeah, and some interesting stats that the Smmc have produced around fuel in terms of car registrations for February and indeed the year to date. So if we look at year to date, diesel and mild hybrid diesel are actually the smallest sectors, whereas battery electric vehicles account for 14.3% of total volumes year to date. Plug-in hybrids 7.9%, hybrids 11.7%, but diesel on its own just 5.7%, and of course petrol way out in front at 43.3%. But it really is demonstrating now the acceleration of electric and alternatives over and above diesel.
And just before we move on to the next story, I think you've got some performance from the commercial vehicle market as well, Curtis, that hasn't had much coverage this week so far.
Yeah, hot off the presses here. So the Smmc figures for new van registrations So for February, registrations fell 6% to 16,165 units. So year to date, LCV registrations are down by 18.2%, although as the SMMT points out, this is compared with a very strong start to 2021, which if you can recall 12 months ago, strong demand from the construction sector and home delivery sector, so that they were huge drivers of registrations this time last year. So the SMMT forecasts that the LCV market will actually grow 2% in 2022, and ending the year just shy of pre-pandemic levels. So, a real confidence there in the return of the LCV market.
And sticking with positive news, we're heading over to AM Online, and they've collated a few sort of views of the market from recent interviews that they've carried out. And the header is that car dealers positive despite loss of traditional March change mayhem. Now, there's a few interviews in here and a few comments from people across the market, and I had the pleasure of watching the interview there that AM did with Darren Arden from Perry's, our friend Steve Young from ICDP, and Professor Saker on their views on the market. And I know that Darren Arden was pretty well positive. I think he's entering the year with a little bit of caution. But they did allude to the fact that they did have a very, very positive carryover of new vehicle orders coming into the new year, as many others would have done as well. So you think it's fairly positive that the order bank is there, and they will turn into deliveries at some point. The key is when that's going to turn into deliveries. And he alluded to a reasonably healthy part exchange level of those new cars as well. So, that's bringing much valued sort of wholesale trade stock into the sector, which I know they'll be wanting as much as anything else. So I think there's a bit of positive news from across the sector at the minute that they know their orders are building and there is green shoots starting to appear, albeit maybe not as quick as they want for the March plate, as the sort of reliance on that new vehicle plate for the year.
Yeah, definitely, and it is worth heading over to this story because it's got a really good selection of talking heads. They're all dealer group bosses. So, for instance, Stephen Eagle, head of the Stephen Eagle Group, he says the mood is very positive. We have momentum on our side and are going from strength to strength with both brands. So that's across Lexus and Toyota. And Graham Potts, chief exec of Eden Motor Group, he goes on to say there is no shortage of consumer demand still, so business is going really well. So there's some real confidence in the market here, in terms of demand. Supply is another matter, but we can see that consumer demand is still there.
And I like the closing comment there from Graham. So he's put that order new double glazing for your home or a new sofa, and it will be a few months before you get them. That's just the way it has to be in car retail now. Car retail is simply aligned to every other right now, as we need to help customers understand that. So obviously alluding to the fact that we haven't got fields of cars sat there at the minute, that the consumers will have to order the vehicles and wait for them, as they do with double glazing or sofas in many cases. So yeah, interesting view that. But again, like Curtis has said there, worth heading over to that AM story because it's a great little deep dive into some of the views of some serious executives from across the sector on what they believe will happen this year.
Yeah, and we can't avoid the big story that's dominating news this week, the invasion of Ukraine, and we've picked a story from Automotive News Europe, which sort of shed some light on how this is going to start impacting, or how it's already started impacting car production. So the headline at Automotive News Europe is Europe's auto production crashes as flow of wire harnesses dries up. So within the story, it talks about the importance of Ukraine as a producer of wire harnesses that are used in European car manufacturing, especially in Germany, across BMW Group, Volkswagen Group, and Porsche. And with the invasion, the production has halted, and this is now causing supply issues in the rest of the supply chain. We have seen some of these manufacturers suspend production. Volkswagen's done it in Wolfsburg, in its hometown. BMW, I think, has done it in Leipzig, and indeed in Cowley, the mini plant at Cowley.
Yeah, and I mean it's when you start to see some of these sort of challenges start to present themselves again, and what's happening there. I know we spoke before this podcast, Curtis. I think you were quite surprised. One, that they changed the name from wiring loom to harness,
yes, yeah.
And secondly that they were average about 3.1 miles long in an average car now, in terms of the cabling that's in those vehicles, which kind of puts context in terms of the reliance on the supply chain. And
Yes.
that when you've got a vehicle that you've got every other part for that vehicle apart from the wire harness, because you're reliant on this one supplier that's in one of these locations, there's not a lot you can do about that, is there? You can't finish making that vehicle and deliver it to the market. And that's the challenges that the manufacturers have faced throughout the pandemic, and now continue to face again with what's now happening in the Ukraine. So some challenging times ahead again, unfortunately, for some of the manufacturers.
So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now, here's friend of the podcast, Steve Whitten, with his latest Men Able moment, taking a look at the big news story that's been unfolding this week that we've just been talking about, and reflecting on next week's International Women's Day.
Yeah, hi Phil, hi Curtis, and here's another Men Able Moments. Not a slushy one, and no poems this week, I'm afraid. I'm going to get straight to the point. And I think that's what you would expect in the week that we've seen unfold across Europe, yet again, a horrendous war that I don't think any of us clearly could have anticipated, and it's just absolutely vile to watch. Now, I'm not going to make a political comment or say anything sort of, that takes us into that. We've all seen the news and we've all seen what's going on, and you can't help but to be moved by what's happening. But I'm going to link it to this Men Able Moments, as you might expect, because next week marks International Women's Day on the 8th of March. And hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to that. And that's where it might get a little bit slushy. So I'm going to warn you in advance that is a possibility. Because right back in the early days, when we started Men Able, I had loads of people say to me, well, Men Able, isn't it just about men? And we had to redirect their attention to the branding and our actual name, because it's not Men Able at all. It's Enable with an M on the front. Now, unfortunately, the nuance of English language means that spells men able, but it is actually enable. And I've got to say, at the beginning, yes, we were driven by the fact that the industry is male-dominated. There are more men working in it than women. It's just a legacy that goes back years. We can't do anything about that. There is work happening to address that, but it's a slow old job. But what it actually does point to is that what we have across our industry is an imbalance of energy. So forget sex and gender for a minute and whatever you were born as. It's not about that. It's not about how many men or how many women are actually in the business. And yes, there is work going on to address gender imbalance, but it's actually about the imbalance of energy. And what we've observed is that our industry has a masculine dominance. And masculine energy is all about being competitive, being aggressive, being combative, being on top of your game, being at the top of league tables, achieving results, drive, determination. And feminine energy, by comparison, is about nurturing and care and being collaborative and looking out for each other. Now, I personally am very happy and open to talk about being very much in touch with my feminine side, my feminine energy. And I have to say, I've learnt to harness that and use it to my advantage in terms of my survival. And so when I look at the stuff that I see happening in the news this week, it's a real extreme example of what I'm talking about. On the one hand, you've got an aggressor, you've got a competitive, combative, driven situation that is very, very masculine. But what I've been absolutely moved by, and this could be the slushy moment that's coming up, is the absolute resolve and determination of all the women involved in that horrendous situation that are climbing on trains and leaving their loved ones, that are looking after their kids and making sure that everyone is being cared for, nurtured for, and looked after. And some of those stories have been really, really moving. One such story was of a lady that I saw on the border at Poland who had gone across and just randomly picked a mother and her daughter and took her back to her large house where she'd already housed a number of single females with their children to make sure that they were looked after and cared for. So in a very tenuous kind of way, that's our Men Able Moments just saying, it's International Women's Day next week. Let's give a massive shout out to the amazing strength that women in our industry and in our world actually have and what they bring to our lives. And from a Men Able perspective, we are going to continue our particular mission, which is to address the imbalance of masculine and feminine energy across the industry. As I said, there is work going on that's addressing gender imbalance, and we clearly do need to get more females working in our industry. We also need to get more young people working in our industry, desperately. And I think the IMI launched an article this week that talks about that. And all of that, from my perspective, really does link back to a fairly deep-rooted mental health issue that we are uncovering as we continue our work through Men Able. And that is, again, not anything to do with the number of men in the industry, although that clearly doesn't help, but it is the imbalance of energy. We have far too much masculine energy. And yes, that drives our results and drives our achievements, but it also holds us back. So, little thought to leave you with. Get in touch with your feminine energy. And that's not about wearing pink and eating quiche, but just to be prepared to be more collaborative, more nurturing, more caring, and look out for each other. And in these difficult times, take care, and we'll see you again soon.
Well, some well-chosen words there from Steve, as ever. And if you would like to get in touch with Stephen to find out how Men Able can help you or your business, then you can find him on LinkedIn, or you can email him at Stephen with a PH, .witten@menable.org.
Yeah, some definite food for thought there, particularly for the automotive sector. And I know that one of the stories we're going to be talking about now links into what you mentioned there, but we know that right across the sector there's a lot going to be happening on the 8th of March there. Not only we've mentioned on the podcast, haven't we, Curtis, with the Barbara Cox Awards,
yes,
that they'll be announcing the winner and the runners-up and congratulating those nominated on Tuesday the 8th of March through the Women in Drive thing there, and there's a lot more going on. So where you can get involved, then we do urge you, please do get involved. So with that in mind, heading over to our next story, and this is again from motors.co.uk, which has launched a video series highlighting women in the automotive sector. So this is where motors.co.uk is championing this year's International Women's Day with a month-long series of YouTube interviews with prominent women across the automotive sector. So great initiative here by Motors and what they're doing there, Curtis.
It is, and the first of these videos has actually gone live this week, and it's with Cleo Collins, who is the W Series race mechanic, and she's carved out a really successful career as a technician working on cars for the all-female single-seater racing championship. It's a fascinating interview, great insight into what drives her, and what she wants to be doing in the industry. And that will be followed by interviews with Hannah Fisher, who's Senior Brand Marketing Manager at motors.co.uk, Hannah Gordon, who's the owner of Spanner Tech Services, and Sarah Crabtree, who's Sales Director at Evoke Classics. And all these interviews are hosted by Rebecca Chaplin from Car Dealer, who asked some great questions. So do check that out on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely, and as it says there, that be covered on YouTube, but obviously promoted through not only the motors.co.uk platform, but also and Facebook group, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. So those users of TikTok, I'm not sure that's me and you, Curtis.
No,
yeah.
I think we fall outside of that.
I think we are, yeah. Not coming to me anytime soon. But again, a great initiative. Again, anything that gets behind this is fantastic and promotes some of the great work that's going on, and particularly across the automotive sector, is only great news. So again, keep your eyes open for that in the social space, and do get involved and support where possible. And 8th of March, don't forget that there'll be a lot going on right across the automotive sector around the International Women's Day.
Yeah, definitely. And a shout out to Lucy Tugby at eBay Motors Group, who says the motoring industry has always been male dominated. Women currently only represent 20% of the automotive sector, dropping below 10% at executive level. So that really sort of sheds a light on why it's so important to be highlighting this on International Women's Day.
Yeah. I mean, the automotive sector is getting better, but it's still not good enough. Let's be clear. There's still a lot for them to do. So again, we'll keep banging that drum. And I've headed back over to AM Online for the final story, and this is an acquisition. We haven't been talking about that many acquisitions this year after we sort of the big ones we got left with at the end of last year. But this is a great little group there that Parks Motor Group has completed the acquisition of Borders Motor Group up there in Scotland. And Parks Motor Group has joined the Lexus franchise and added its representation of Hyundai, Skoda and Toyota through this acquisition. And they're actually 16th place in the retail group by this. The turnover is added, to this sort of this northern. I mean, well, very north for you, Curtis. This one, but
extreme north. For
me. So again, great little business, great little acquisition there, and representing some fantastic brands there up in Scotland.
Yeah, and it is a really, really good fit because. Parks, as you say, they're rated 16 in the AM 100. Now, this acquisition will see the addition of Toyota car dealerships in St Boswells, Carlisle and Dumfries, along with Hyundai in Carlisle and Dumfries, Lexus, which it'll be representing for the first time in Carlisle, and Skoda in Dumfries. And this deal completed on March the 1st, and as I say, it's such a good fit. And sadly, it will see Border Motor Cars disappearing, and that's a long-established family-run business, and within the story, there's some comments from the majority shareholder of Borders, Archie McLean, who says it was an extremely difficult decision to divest from the retail motor industry, and I do so with a very heavy heart. However, I was keen to focus my energies on my other businesses, and once I had made this decision to sell, it was important for me to find a buyer that shared my values and ethos. And I think that's the absolute crux of the story, because who could possibly be a better buyer than Parks Motor Group? So it will expand their representation across Scotland, and indeed with all those brands, and see it debut with Lexus. So it's a really good fit.
Yeah, well done to Parks there, and wishing you all the best, Archie, in your other ventures as well. So so that's it for today. So again, do listen to the Darren Martin interview on last week's podcast. Very particularly if you want sort of a little bit of reassurance of what to expect over the weeks of March as we sort of head towards the end of this first quarter. And again, great insight there and thoughts from Steve Whitten, who does always leave you something to think about from his little men-able moments as well. And he'll be joining us again in a fortnight, back on with, again, something I suspect will be very thought-provoking of what they're up to in that world. So, and just finally, do join in on International Women's Day on Tuesday the 8th of March. Get involved where you can, and let's keep promoting this message, particularly across the automotive sector. But that's it for this week, Curtis, isn't it? Nice little mix of stories there.
Yeah, sadly, that is all for this week. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.